Here we go. We're live and recording. Lucky, Kyle,
Here
how
we
are you guys?
are,
Hey, what's going on?
live
It's
on AyAyAyAi.
ay 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 ay.
Ay, 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 ay.
That was awesome.
When I lived down in Argentina in the very early 2000s, and when I was there, there was a Mexican girl that I got to know, and she was awesome, and we'd always kind of make fun of her because down in Argentina, you're speaking Spanish, but
Hmm.
it's different. You
Yeah.
got the Castilian Castellano Spanish, comparably to what you have in Mexico, and
Mhm.
Mexico's got a little bit different, and that's. I almost feel like when you say "ay ay 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 ay," that's going to be a little bit more of that Mexican Spanish. They're not going to be saying that in Argentina.
Oh
So
man, I
she,
felt that
she
one,
would,
man. You did a
yeah,
good
Yeah,
job,
I
brother.
felt it
she would
too.
say that, and it would ring so true. We loved teasing her about it, but she loved her heritage, and it was
Hmm.
great.
Yeah, I have an all new respect for you, Kyle.
Thank you, thank you.
That was awesome. I couldn't have
Yeah.
done it
we
better
should
myself, my friend.
we should take that clip and make that into an intro, right? Do it again, Kyle.
Which
Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Just do the ay 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 ay. Just do it the way you did it.
okay. And I'm thinking of her. I'm trying to remember how it went. It was like, and I
Yeah,
can hear like the mariachi song in the back, and she, ay, ay, ay.
there you go. There you go.
Yeah,
That
Perfect,
right
perfect.
pitch and everything, man. You know, it's the way it is. You got to feel it.
yeah,
So
exactly. Got to get into it. Got to get into it.
Hmm.
So,
so Kyle is a multilingual, so it's not a surprise that he has the ay 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 right on the dot, right?
Hmm.
yeah.
What other language do you speak other than Spanish?
Uh, Somewhat some English, I guess you could say. No,
Some
so
English, yeah.
English, I'd only say I'm fluent in English and in Spanish. But I lived when I was little in Japan for 3 years,
Oh wow.
and so definitely not fluent in it. In fact, like my mind thinks I understand a lot more what people are saying, but I mean, I was from first grade to third grade living there. My dad was in the military, and so we lived over there, and I went to an American school. But at the same time, I mean, any chance that we could get, we were sneaking off post, off the base, that had the barbed wire around it, and we'd go out there with our yen and man, Japanese candy. Still to this day, that's my guilty pleasure. I love that stuff, and so
Really?
Japanese a little bit, and they say skoshi is a little bit, and then a little bit of Arabic as well. Did two deployments to Iraq
Wow.
and had an interpreter there. Funny enough, I was just in the grind of so many different other things that I didn't really get to study the language like I probably should have. But at the same time, definitely know some, cordialisms and things like that of just greeting people and saying hi and things like that as well too. So
Yeah.
actually, hey, I'll share one about Arabic that's really funny too. That um, I think depending on where you're from in the Middle East as well too, and your Arabic language. But one of the things that I learned, and that's what I like, is like how can I endear myself to the people and to the language there as well too, even though I might not be able to, take the time to study it like I want to and things like that. But during my first deployment, found out, and I was talking to one of the Mukhtars, who's a village leader basically over there, and he was kind of telling me, he's like, well, we kind of have something in our culture, like when you see someone from afar off, and this kind of goes with your ay. When you see somebody from afar off, you say holla, 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 holla. And that means like it's not so much of the sound or the noise, it's more of like the excitement that you're excited to see, like that's my
Right.
best friend, what's going on? It's
Wow.
like down the street
Ah,
kind of way.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so I started doing that, and like a lot of the people in the community like got a kick out of it, like when they were around or seeing, like when I'd go over to his like house and stuff like that and sit down with them
yeah.
and drink chai and get to know him a little, and we'd talk about all different stuff. But anyways, that was like an endearment thing, and people were like, "Oh, it's the white guy that know he
Ah.
does that." Like, yeah, like we
Wow.
kind of do that, but they don't really do that. So, kind of going with your all different cultures, all different
Hmm.
sayings, but there's
Yeah.
there's love and passion in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Man, isn't it the like that's probably one of the best things I just learned about language because I've
Mhm.
been reading books about language and John Warden, he writes few language books and he goes about like how different languages come, but you know what, you just learn something new about language every time you talk about language, right?
Yeah.
This is good stuff, man. Like, yeah, I never thought about it. Like, there's greetings and there's greetings. Like,
Hmm. Oh yeah.
it's so cultural. It's so
Hmm.
personal to that cultural. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
good, man.
Well, there's one kind of interesting thing. I remember this. I'm probably going to get in trouble, maybe politically correct or whatever. I don't
Right.
know. But living down in Argentina, in the early from about 2001 to 2004, sorry, 2002 to 2004 that I was living there. I mean, I'd see guys like going down the street, like holding hands. And I'm like, all right. So I guess
Hmm.
that's a little bit different. And I didn't know. I thought, obviously maybe they're gay or something like that, but that was not the case. There in their culture,
Mm.
dudes hold hands. If you're best friends, you're holding hands down the street. Funny enough, in
Oh,
Iraq,
In
same
Iraq,
exact thing.
yeah.
same
School
exact
friends
thing. Yeah.
hold hands, men hold
Right.
hands.
Right.
And
Right.
so
Yeah.
me
Right.
and the Mukhtar, because we got to know each other pretty well and we were kind
Right.
of boys, when we'd go down and go check out his village and go talk to people and things like that. I had some other roles when I was in the military. I was kind of the money man, I guess you could say. I had
Right.
micro grants and would help the businesses in the village, not only his, but a lot of different other villages as well too. And so they always wanted to put their best foot forward. But I'd walk hand in hand, holding his hand, and me and him would walk down, doing.
Wow.
And so again, just cultures. There's all different
Right.
things, but
Right.
it meant there was a bond there, and still to this day, I feel like he's still a good friend of mine.
Wow.
Wow.
So, man.
That's respectful to get immersed that way in the culture, and they feel it, because when you try like that, I could only feel that just makes people that you're just trying that much harder to be part of who they are, and that's respectful. That's
Right.
Yeah.
amazing. That's a good story, and I mean,
I
at
think it
least.
definitely helped out our mission, what we were doing over in Iraq, particularly my unit and things like that.
Hmm.
I was, General Petraeus was big time on, I'm probably getting too much army stuff here or
Hmm.
military stuff, but
Yeah, I remember that
General,
ICO, right?
yeah, yeah, coin
Yeah.
operations. Like you
Yeah,
got to
coin
get to know
operations.
the
Yeah.
people. You got to get in there.
Yeah.
And thankfully for my love of languages and love of just people in general, like I don't care what language, I don't care what background, I don't care whatever.
Right.
Ultimately, I just wanted to be, I wanted to be with them and know that like, hey, I'm here for you. And
Right.
I think our unit did a really good job of that in particular.
And General Petraeus, he said all of his success was surrounded around coin, right? Winning hearts and minds, right?
Yep.
And it works.
Wow.
Yeah.
No matter what you use to have in between you and another person, as long as you're side by side, things completely change. And
Yeah.
holding hands, it just escalates until the next level. Like we're holding hands as we were speaking. That makes
Mhm.
it a whole lot better than shouting at each other or whatever the case
Yeah,
is.
exactly. But it's funny because like during my first deployment, I had that. Second deployment, my role kind of shifted and changed, which with promotions and things like that. I was a captain, and I was kind of the right hand man to our battalion commander when we'd go to meetings. I'm like slipping them notes of like certain questions to ask and things like that. But in those meetings, I mean, they had Iraqi generals and things like that. None of those guys are wanting to hold my hand. I'll say that much. So a little bit different, not quite that personal lovey-dovey feel, because but it was just different on the civilian side.
Hmm.
He was proud of his village, proud of his town, and proud that he considered us as friends.
Hmm.
Right, right, right. People say it right now, like in the Zoom communications, day of past COVID, right? Uh, is that your communications are super intimate, even in Zoom, because right now you're seeing each
Mhm.
other in a total different manner. Where you used to actually sit side by side, now you're seeing face to face, right? This communication that we're having right now, it's not typical what you will have in office space,
Hmm.
right? You might not make eye contact actually with somebody as you speak to them.
Mhm.
You might not have this focused concentration as you're
Yeah.
speaking
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
this is what Zoom requires you to do, right? Have that ability to look at that person who's speaking,
Yeah.
and you're just looking at me straight. That look, bad or good, this is good in my list of things that I say
Yeah.
good for communication, right? That body language, the posture that you have.
Yeah, I would love to, because I'm sure someone's working on this somewhere, kind of jumping into artificial intelligence and
Hmm.
kind of what we're going to be diving into a little bit more here. I know we're going to talk the language side, and I can't wait to do that a little bit more. But I was thinking about that as you were just mentioning that, like someone's got to be working on how are they going to be able to read body language with tone of voice with the actual words that you're doing? Because those are three levels of communication. I know,
Mm-hmm.
I love working and talking with our clients when I have that time from time to time. I love getting on the phone with them, but even more, I love getting in person with them. But obviously, COVID restricts that, or has restricted that in the past a little bit more. So at best, worst case scenario, I want to get a Zoom call. Worst case scenario, like I want to, at least get on the phone with them, because now you can hear fluctuations in voices, pauses, all those other things. So language is one of those interesting things, but you're talking a whole different thing. The body language and how they're saying it can be so different, and it can mean so much to what they're saying or less to what they're saying, or maybe if they're lying, all that stuff.
Yep.
So I'm wondering if
Right. Right.
there's got to be some people working on that aspect to go, hey, we're reading these signs, because I know there's professional people that like view that and
Right.
see that,
Right. Right. Right.
especially in my time during the military. I mean, when we were going out and questioning people, we had specialized people that would read body language and body image and ask questions, and do that. There's got to be intelligence coming up that way as well too, to help out with that.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken his name, but there's a gentleman named I'm gonna skip his name actually. I'm not gonna try to butcher it. He literally can dissect your facial muscles and point them out and say who does what and why they do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he will have like names for each of the twitch in the muscle, and that's important because like it's just not human. You can do that with any animals that
Mm-hmm.
has the facial structures that we have. So this is what makes us predatory, right? That we are able to see straight. Versus horses, they have their eyes on the side, right? So they're
Mm-hmm.
only able to see on the side. So they're being hunted versus hunting, right? So if you look at the muscle movement of each, you start dissecting the information that you need, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that gentleman, has, like I said, 1,300 muscles in the face, and if you're able to, identify that with AI can only increase in its knowledge over time. No matter how many times it gets wrong, it will start getting it right 99% of the time, right? And that is a superb level of information in communications, right? Superb level. We're talking about trust is being built
Mm-hmm.
off of that, right? Um, and the reason I'm going down this rabbit hole here is to talk about deep fake. Like what you just said about body language. What about deep fake? What about understanding that Asif is actually here in person talking to you, and this is not an AI that's talking to you and representing Asif in a video, audio, verbal, and body language, and all of that combined, right?
Yeah.
So the recent one that
Wow.
happened with deepfake is that Tom Cruise picked up his guitar and started playing it, and Justin Bieber was like, "Oh, bro, you play guitar too? Let me pick up the guitar and play with you." And then come to find out, that's not Tom Cruise talking to Justin Bieber. Justin Bieber got fooled by some guy that lives in Netherlands, right?
Hmm.
That's deepfake. That's how
Yeah.
fake it gets. Like
What?
people will get Tom Cruise wrong. Um, so
That's funny.
this body language information that we're talking about, that's a sophisticated level of
Mm-hmm.
AI system to dictate the fact that this person is fake, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what
Mm-hmm.
Kyle has as a facial movement, what Lucky has as a facial movement, if that was to understood by an AI and AI knew that Lucky would need to know who he's talking to and that person he's talking to is fake, it will tell Lucky. It will tell Kyle, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
That's
just
that's
throwing that out there because that's super, super important about what you said.
Yeah, especially cybersecurity. So I didn't mention before. So I have a good friend, one of my really good friends from high school.
Mm-hmm.
There's a he owns a company. He's founded a company called ID.me. If you guys have ever heard of them before,
Yeah.
but they're doing all sorts of
They're
stuff
doing
when it
all
comes
sorts of stuff. Yeah. And the
to
cloud
security.
industry. Yeah. And security.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So Blake Hall. I mean, it's wild to think back in the day. 25 years ago. I mean, we're playing soccer together. We're just jamming out in the car, driving, doing all the fun high school stuff, and now we're off in the world. And I know I see him quite a bit on the media and news and everything like that, because ID.me has just exploded. They're over
Mm-hmm.
probably $2 billion company. So and they got some major contracts that have been in the works, and some things that are now just really coming to fruition. And there's so much more to help out. And their company really is making a huge difference in that, because there is so much fraud going on, in that aspect. And sometimes when I've heard him talk about some of the things, I'm going, holy cow, this is deep, man. There are some people that are like straight scandalous out there figuring out weird ways to rip out, whether that's government or other companies or whatever.
Mhm.
It's pretty nuts by just people stealing people's identities in different ways that I would never even think to steal people's identity.
Yeah, it's impressive. How like you said, the deep fakes. And not that from the deep fake side of it, but I know, it I know that there's a definitely AI that, like, for example, some like China is using for AI that they've developed with Google, I believe.
Hmm.
Was it Google that got in a little bit of hot water with working with China to develop the AI they use for what they used in their, I guess, IDing of their all of their um, all of the people in China, and what they use to track people with their cell phones. All that's tied into a system with voice, like you guys mentioned, with the voice recognition. All that's tied together to one system. It's just the fact that it's being used by, a government as opposed to something positive.
Yeah. I think one of the cool, I mean, we're mentioning that we're talking about facial recognition. I've seen a lot of different things. I mean, they're coming along. It's definitely not there yet when it
Hmm.
comes to American Sign Language. That's, the number one. Most countries have their own version of sign language. So that's different. Even if it's English, England has their version of sign language. So that's why we call it ASL, American Sign Language. But some of the things are amazing where, the video and when they're signing and doing that, it's being able to be processed through the machine and be able to be subtitled into English text, so people can read exactly what that person is signing and saying. So I think that's going to be right along with technology. I've seen
Hmm.
it. It's not great, but it's getting better, and it's getting there more and more. And so we're not too far away from that being a reality more and more.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Like Cisco has WebEx, and WebEx can translate everything you're saying in, I think, 30 some different languages simultaneously in the subtitle, right? So
Yeah.
ASL,
Wow.
I've seen a recent one where the girl does full ASL, and it's all being translated to what she's saying.
Mm.
And the use of all of this technology combined is a powerful tool to have,
Hmm.
right? So you mentioned China. Well, China is far ahead than majority of its competition, right? Because they don't have ethics that we have.
Mm.
We can do the same as them. We can copy what China does, but we have ethics, right? So a lot of the police departments in the United States are banning facial recognition, right?
Hmm.
Well, not that it's permanent, but it's banned because facial recognition doesn't really favor a person with the skin color that is not really trained by the AI. The AI is not really sure about how to recognize that face, right? So those kind of issues, that bias and ethics, is what's keeping us in the bag at this point. But we are improving in tons of other things, right?
Hmm.
Like, say, for example, Amazon. We can literally go up to Amazon right now and say, how do I buy a chat bot from you, right? And you can
Yeah.
install that chat bot to say, like, let's have one-on-one conversation just like a human would, right?
Mhm.
And it will carry on a human conversation. That's a conversational AI that will carry on the conversation and give you all the information you need. But to add to that piece would be that voice detection you mentioned earlier. How do I figure what sort of emotions are you going through? Are you in rush? Are you hurried? Are you having pain? Maybe you need to be escalated to a human being, right? So these are the ethical questions that you have, and we're sorting through them right now. But we are in the right track as far as ethics, safety, privacy, and security of AI goes.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've seen some stuff. I know IBM Watson. I mean, there's a handful of other things that
Yeah.
not only are they producing, text to speech, but now you're able to say, hey, I want happy. Hey, I want sad. Hey, I want monotone. Hey, I want,
Hmm.
you can give it different like flavors of emotions as well, too. And so I know they've got to be able to recognize that as well. I haven't seen as much on that side.
Yeah. It's been a
Um,
while.
yeah, and then I
IBM,
I had
yeah.
this was probably, it's probably been 3 years, but it was like one of the key players from Alexa, and he mentioned like how much it took on, because he was working for Amazon, how much it took to get to hear a voice from across the room, to
Hmm.
detect that and get that from speech to text
Right.
into their system so then it could process and all that stuff.
Wow.
He said years, and he goes, you don't understand like how hard that is. It's one thing when you got a microphone right next to you and it's
Hmm.
clear, but when
Hmm.
you're talking across the room or something like that, he goes, it's a different story, like
That's right.
altogether.
That's right. Because by the time that input arrives the system, it has have some interference that
Hmm.
otherwise wouldn't happen if it was microphone right in the face. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I wonder what the carbon footprint was to train Alexa's AI to actually develop that over a period of time. Because that's, I think they're talking about that more now. They're considering AIs, and they're talking about what the considerations to train AIs, what the length, the time and the energy. Because we work with basic neurons and goo and carbon, and but computers work off of power. So
Hmm.
just imagine the power it takes to train these AIs like Alexa over a period of time.
Yeah, yeah.
So in a conflict resolution, like my study was, to focus on people that didn't have passport, people that had no nationality, right? They're very small in population out of 7 billion people, but there are good numbers of them that doesn't have any nationality or a passport or freedom of movement, right? So that studying led me into energy and water, right? Like, okay, you have energy and you have water. Now water provides energy that is being used in majority of the country that can have the water that turns into energy, and that water is becoming more and more of a problem. So yes, we talk about energy. We're seeing energy in Ukraine. We're talking about energy for Europe. We're talking about energies in some part of US even, right? Because the source of energy is drying up. Source of energy is sort of getting limited. So how do you best use it? My take on that is that look, um, just because we are using amount of energy that we're using now doesn't mean that's the type of energy that we will use in the future, right? It's sort of
Hmm.
like taking out the bank loan to invest in the future, so that way in future you have enough progress that you can pay off the bank loan. But at the end, you don't have any loans left anymore, or you don't have any payments left anymore. Now you are you know benefiting from that bank loan you took out, right?
Hmm.
So that's the investment that AI and machine learning and training the data and the cost of training that data comes from, right? So in a
Hmm.
5 year cycle, if there's a 50-year cycle, what does it look like, right?
Hmm.
I think lucky we talk about like storing data, right? Training data, got it. Turn on the switch, turn it off at the end of the day. But when you store the data, it costs a lot of money to store that data.
Yeah.
And for me, there's no other way to store data without training. You have to train the data in order to have better storing system, right? Storing system that doesn't require all the data to be actually physically available. It's just that the AI will have to be able to recall it because it has been trained to respond using the latest memory that it has and with some of the past memories and not all of it, right? The metadata, right? If you have a signature metadata that you can carry into the present time to make a present decision with most recent information that you have received, merging those together, you make a decision. Maybe we don't have to store data the way we do today, and the amount of
Hmm.
data storing that we're doing today is what's taking up so much of the energy, right? Um, uh, Data is so physical. When I talk about data, like I get blank stares from some people. It's because we think of data just like, oh, okay, it's just coming in and going, it's disappearing.
Yeah.
No,
It's
Hmm.
like,
it's the data that you're seeing is data at use. Data that's at rest is what costs the most money, and that's how cloud systems and so on and so forth bills you for the data at
Hmm.
rest.
I laugh. It literally took almost my mom like explaining it multiple times about what the cloud really is. She's like, I don't get it. Like, like, oh, is it like shooting up to the satellite? And you're like, I mean, not typically, but hey,
Maybe in the
okay.
future when the Starlink is available,
It
yeah.
could.
Yeah, exactly. But she just like didn't get it. She's like, they're always talking about the cloud. Like, it's not a cloudy day, so I don't like what does it. Can you not like upload stuff to the cloud now? And you're just like, oh, mom, like it's
Yep.
all
You
right,
got to
it's
have
all right.
multiple clouds intersecting in some way for it
Yeah,
to work.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm just wondering about that guy who invented the word cloud. Come on, that was a joke, right? That has to be a joke.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I get it. I don't know. Yeah. I wanted to like really like pick your guys' brain. Like I
Hmm.
know usually people come on and you guys are asking them. I wanted to
Right.
pick your guys' brain. I've been actually pretty excited about this since Asif and I connected and we were talking about it. So I wanted to kind of geek out a little bit, talk a little bit more on the language side and where things are at today and where it came from and things like that.
Hmm.
But I feel like you guys have probably a pretty good amount of information. I would love to get your guys' input and ultimately where things are going as well on that aspect. So you guys, I'm sure, are very familiar with NLP, natural language processing, and things like that. When it comes to well, ultimately, kind of the premise of it. Before there's been machine translation around for a long time.
Hmm.
The very start of machine translation was more of like a database where it just go, okay, this word in English, and in Spanish is there it is. There's the match. Great. We can
Yeah.
machine translate. Anytime we see this word, we're going to plug in this word. So all it was is just a database of putting in the
Hmm.
names. 2016, when Google came out, I guess this is where it's like more public now.
Right.
When they came out with their neural machine translation, that changed the game.
Right.
Because instead of databases where you're looking up one word at a time and it's putting it together, and in a lot of languages, you flip the sentence around, it looks all very different in that. In languages, you always look on what we call a sentence based level. We
Hmm.
call it a segment within translation. So you're always looking at that. It could be a title of something, it could be a full sentence with a period at the end or anything like that, but you're looking at the segment level. And when Google Translate was able to bring that out, that was a big thing because the machine, I mean, translation went to this is kind of garbage, like don't trust it, to now neural machine translation, you're going, it's not half bad. It's not perfect. Definitely
Hmm.
not perfect. But this isn't horrible anymore. It used to be horrible where you're just kind of like, cool, there's some words that doesn't make sense. It garbled it together on a sentence and you think you should be able to read it. And people are going, but look, it's amazing. Neural machine translation just flipped the lid. And I look at it. So when that came out in 2016, to give you an idea, I've been in the language translation industry for a while. In 2016, about less than 1% of our clients, when neural machine translation came out, were they looking at even a machine translation possibility. It was just not good enough.
Hmm.
Okay. I'm going to fast forward to today, 2022. Okay. Of our clients, about 15% use machine translation as a viable solution for them. It doesn't mean it's the best solution. Still, human translation, professional translators are still hands down the best.
Right.
But is it a viable solution when you got a budget of only this and you're going, should we translate? Should we just scrap it all and say we're not going to translate everything, keep it in English or keep it in whatever the language? Or, yeah, we can meet that budget and do some machine translation. Yeah. And so that works out. And it's now at the point too where you can do machine translation and then you have a human professional translator review it and clean it up. Okay. I always like to say machine translation will give you a good gist of what's going on. It might
Hmm.
not make 100% sense, but if you read a paragraph, you're going to know what they're talking about, but it just might not be as clean and processed. And that's where human professional translation is going to be a lot better because you're going to read that and you're going to know exactly what's going on and exactly the intent of what they're trying to say. But then you have this middle ground where you go, hey, let's clean it up. Still not perfect, but yeah, it's pretty good. And sometimes the flow is just a little bit off and a little bit odd, but
Right.
you get the point. You know what's going on, and everything's all pretty good, and that works for some people.
Yeah. Well, I got to give you my background on that. I used to live in Hawaii, and I signed up to do language translation
Okay.
for some company in New York. So they're Arizona based, but most of the clients were calling from medical hospitals and universities in New York. So
Mm-hmm.
4 in the morning, I was up like logging into the system to say I'm available. Call me anytime you need.
Mm-hmm.
So they will
So
call
you
me.
were doing interpretation, not
Yep,
so translation's the written word, interpretation's the spoken
yep.
word.
I was interpreting over the phone, and
Okay.
man, it was it was an experiment that I'll tell you what, it paid off for amount of hours that I worked there and amount of hours I got paid. It paid off because you learn so much. you're like, I'm not talking about it. I'm not allowed to talk about it. But this is the silent knowledge that you're like, oh my goodness, because there was like a court case, there was legal informations, there are medical things. So it was just a fun part-time job that I had because I was stationed over in Hawaii. So when you live in Hawaii, you got to make some side hustle.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to be eating ramen noodles every day in Hawaii.
Yeah. And spam
Spams,
and ramen
that's
noodles.
right,
So,
spams,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You go to 7-Eleven and live in 7-Eleven for your lunch, dinner,
You
and
could
lunch.
always fish, you know.
Oh yeah. And see, remind me what language? I couldn't remember again.
So Bengali is my primary language.
Hmm.
But when I was in the military, I tested for Bengali, Hindi, and Urdu. So Indian, Pakistani,
Yep.
and then when I was ready to separate from military, I did my language studying in Farsi, so I could like get a job outside as a Farsi language translator.
Hmm.
And then that didn't work out, so I ended up studying Mandarin when I got out of the military.
Hmm.
Okay.
For the last 5 years, I've tried Mandarin with zero success. Only thing I could learn actually is to say I do not speak Mandarin in Mandarin.
Well, I laugh. I mean, I'm the person in the language translation world, but my brother, I mean, he's smart and he picks up languages in that way. It's incredible. So it always makes me laugh. I mean, he's a lieutenant colonel in the army. He does military intelligence, but he learned Cantonese in the late '90s. Lived over in Hong Kong, and then he went to DLI, the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, and he picked up Mandarin there. But he's good with languages. He's really good with
Wow.
languages. So
So my first indication of me not doing very well in learning a completely brand new language like Mandarin was the D Lab. Remember the D Lab, the fake
yeah, oh yeah.
language they teach you?
Uh-huh. Oh
And
yeah.
not teach you, but they test you on,
Yeah,
right?
they test you to see how
Yeah.
good you are.
And I was like, I should have just stopped there because I did miserable in that test.
Yeah. Well, same thing. And then I took the Spanish test for the military there, and I didn't max it out by any means. You can be I think that's a big thing that people talk about. They're like, oh well, you speak Spanish, so you're good. Being bilingual is very different than saying I'm a good translator or I'm a good interpreter. An
Hmm.
Right.
interpreter even breaks out into two different skill sets because you have
Mm.
what they call consecutive interpretation and simultaneous. Consecutive is most likely it sounds like what you were doing when it comes to what we call OPI, over the phone interpretation.
That's right.
So a person talks, 2 or 3 sentences and then or maybe a paragraph and you're like, man, they got to stop sometime soon. And
Right,
you're just
right.
trying to remember and then you regurgitate that back because they finally pause and now you're saying that. On the other time, it's simultaneous. There's a lot of time for like when people are presenting something and they're going to present it and they're doing it in English, but they need it in Chinese, German, and French as well too.
Wow.
So those interpreters are in little booths, typically in
Right.
the back of that
Hmm.
conference area, or
United
we actually have
Nations.
it via Zoom as well too, and other platforms that they're listening to it and they're having to listen at the same time they're speaking. At the same time, they're still listening because that presenter is not pausing to
Right.
say, "Okay, go ahead, interpreter, go ahead
Right.
and say
Right.
what you
Right.
need to
Right.
say." That
Yeah.
is a very high level skill set to be able to do that.
Hmm.
Not my skill set. I'll definitely say that much. So even
That's
I
Nicole
laugh.
Kidman.
I'm the CEO of a language translation company. I don't do translation. I can't pass our translation test. Okay. And I'm okay with that. And I think that's the big thing. People automatically assume, oh, you're bilingual, then you can translate. It's literally like saying, oh, you speak English? I'm sure you're great at writing novels.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
I could. I don't know. Like you really don't know until you really test yourself and really see.
Yeah. One last thing before I dive into that whole NLP stuff. Nicole Kidman has a movie where she was a translator and she was translating for United Nations.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
the
talking
I
about?
think it's called The Interpreter. Yeah, and she
Yeah, I think
like
it was called Interpreter, right?
overheard someone gonna kill somebody or something like
Yeah.
that when she was in the booth. Yeah,
But look, and NLP is the bread and butter of AI, right? So Amazon actually has like a the ability to capture handwritings, and they captured the letter A in all different ways you can think of. I think there was like about 15,000 ways that they figured out what A is written, like who wrote
mhm,
A, how they wrote it. So that's the level of data collection that Amazon is doing at this time because they just have that computing power, they have the
Wow.
ability, they have the money, right?
yeah,
So it's worth looking into it for yourself, because these big guys are coming up with this technology where you have to merge your capabilities with, right? So
Mhm.
if you merge your capabilities with them, it's where you succeed, because you don't have to do all the work. Amazon will do majority and most of them for you, right? Like I said, chatbot, that ability to
Yep.
translate with Cisco WebEx, Google's ability to translate. So Amazon will be able to write a letter to you just like it was handwritten actually, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that deepfake level handwriting, right?
Yeah.
But it's also able to read. And the reason I go down that path is that in generation of documents, there isn't much. There's always this like computer vision, use the computer vision to capture something and try to figure out what that is. So you identify your labeling, right? And obviously the next step is decisions you have to make off of that labeling and predict, because every time you're making decisions, you're getting better at predictability, what's coming next, right? That's actually
Mhm.
how human brain works, right?
Yep.
Hmm.
We first of all we have to detect within our senses, and then we identify, we labeled it, and if we label it correctly, we get to a best decision making. And if we keep making those best decisions over and over, we get really good at predictability,
Yeah.
right? So
I
so
was
a system that's doing that, it costs a lot of computing power, it costs a whole lot of energy, but that's what the big guys are doing. And when I talk
Mhm.
to a small business that is looking into like next 10, 15 years of the business cycle, it's just that how do you incorporate your business with that, right? What sort of small data set do you bring into this giant sets of data in order to incorporate that and see like how that merges together and produces a good output for you, right? At least a good outcome that you can take it to the market and be profitable, right?
Mhm.
And NLP, look, they're doing all the work, the word banks, right? It's easily available in coding. Like you're writing a Python code, you can go into a word bank and figure out like, okay, this word bank has all the Shakespearean words in it. So if I'm writing a Shakespearean document, I'll go to this word bank and figure out how to write a Shakespearean novel, right?
Mhm.
Um, that's the stage that's next right now. Like as in, we've been doing this identifying and labeling and all this.
Yeah.
How do we produce a document that is to say it's Shakespearean like language, or it works very well for Kyle, because Kyle doesn't need Shakespeare. He just needs somebody to say off the cuff, write this document in this language from this language, right?
So, have you ever heard of? And I'm sure there's other companies and things like that. Jarvis AI. Have you heard of them?
Yeah.
So
Jarvis.
I particularly looked at them. Obviously, we have our
Iron
content
Man.
writers. What'd you say?
The Iron Man. Jarvis is Iron
Yeah,
Man, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jarvis.
exactly.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that's where, but it's a company. If you look up
that's the company. Yeah, yeah,
Jarvis.ai, okay,
yeah,
they're a company,
yeah.
and their claim is like, hey, spit out some stuff like topics of what you want to talk about. So we want to talk about McDonald's and Big Macs and or like Burger King competitor. You just throw some words at it, basically.
Right.
It's going to compute all that stuff, foods, fries, whatever, and it'll just compute all that stuff, and it's going to spit out basically an article for you that's like pre-written, that it's going to have keywords in there and everything else that's all in there, and you kind of look at that. So I will say this much: it's getting better, and it's not only just Jarvis, because this wasn't even around before, but this could really goes to NLP. Is they're figuring that out now. I've done some practices with it because I thought, well, let's see how really good this is.
Yeah.
So I did some stuff. Um, for me, you get maybe 1 to 2 paragraph that's pretty good, and I felt like I fed it a lot.
You bet.
Um, and then but if you're looking to go, hey, let's spit out 1,000 words and let's get 10 or 12 paragraphs out of that thing. Um, I saw so much repetition; it didn't really know how to do that. It was like
Mhm.
trying to figure out how to get more content, and some of the content it's putting in there, it's just like this doesn't even make sense. But
Hmm.
ultimately, I think the biggest thing, everything just keeps on getting better and better and better because,
That's
like I
good.
said, in the translation world, it was a 1-to-1. This word equals this word. Now, neural machine translation comes along. They want to look at the phrase, and I think to kind of punch that phrase or punch that idea a little bit more. A good example, like Tommy goes swimming against the current.
Right.
Okay. Um, at the same time, you have another sentence. The current situation is that. Oops, sorry about that. The current situation is that Ukraine is under attack.
Right.
Okay, how do you translate the word current in so many different languages? That's going to be very, very different.
Yeah.
So you have to look at the words that become before it or the words that come after it to give it contextual basis. And neural machine translation, when that came out, that's why it would like dramatically change the level, the quality level of the translation. But it's still
Mhm.
continually learning because it's got to get better. It's got to get, you got to keep on feeding it more and more and more.
And that's super
Exactly.
important, right? That's the indicator of, hey, do you have an AI, or do you have a bunch of guys sitting overseas typing away on the keyboard and giving you the answers that you're looking for? And this
Mhm.
happening is a human Turks that are sitting around typing on the keyboard, making it look like it's .ai product. Which is funny. I actually met somebody that does that, um, and
Nice.
it's actually part of the process, right? So
Yeah.
like there's a effort that is happening right now in Russian literature, right? So how do you take Russian literature? So you can imagine, okay, you got all sorts of literature from around the world that is complex. Let's talk about Russian literature. That's another complexity, right?
Yeah.
So what they're doing is that they're feeding the system that information, and they're actually having human inputs on what the system is generating, right? So if the system is generating, the human goes in and looks through it and gives it all sorts of feedback, and it goes back in the system. The system relearns it, so on and so forth. So it's actually able to mimic one of the most complex literature system that we have, right? So human input is so important, but not having a system that doesn't improve without the humans is where I get concerned with. As in, like, you don't want human interventions on this AIs over and over. What you want is human feedback and humans' ability to, improve it over time,
Hmm.
right? So not so much of an intervention, but rather say like, yeah, I taught you long enough, but now you are learning on your own. So it's like sort of like raising your kid kind of situation. Like, I helped you ride on the bike long enough. Now you ride the bike on your own. And then as you grow, you can actually figure out your own bike and pick another bike, but you don't need me to intervene anymore, right?
Mhm.
So that's the indicator of AI, but we also need that human in the loop concept. That's very important. And that's where we're having a lot of the dialogues right now. Like, okay, where do we as human, if we're not intervening, what sort of feedback and what sort of control do we need to take of the AI? So it doesn't just run amok, right? It's able to do what it's supposed to do without losing its track, right?
Mhm.
And one of the concerns behind that is that a lot of the AIs that are being developed right now, and a lot of the AIs that will teach itself to improve itself over time, they don't have human in the loop concept. What they have is that concept of like, go out there and make daddy money, right?
Yeah.
And that's where it
Hmm.
ends. And not having that
Complete function.
full thought out complete version of like, okay, what about 15 years from now, how do we control this AI that no longer either performs or performs way too well that we cannot even detect it anymore, right? Sort of like I'm not running a scenario where the AI is like total human intelligence. It's just that, what about that AI that goes underground and is controlled by few individuals, and not everybody has an understanding of how that AI works, right? How do we keep that AI transparent for as long as its life cycle exists,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? So I'm coming up with a lot of scenarios, utopian and dystopian, but at the same time, the point is, how do we keep that AI transparent so it reports back all the time with the right set of information, so we have some sort of human feedbacks and human capability of controlling it.
Yeah. You're saying like that transparency. I mean, obviously in the news, I don't know if you guys follow too much about the whole Elon Musk,
Mm.
trying to buy out Twitter and things like that. I
Right.
mean, that's one thing that I love about what's going on is that transparency there. It sounds, at least that's what he's saying he wants to do. He wants it transparent on why, the algorithms behind it, because obviously there's bias towards certain things or against certain things when it comes to Facebook and Twitter and your news feed and stuff like that. That's one thing that I think is important. And that really comes into play, particularly when it comes to AI. We have to have that transparency. We've got to know what that algorithm's saying behind and how that's actually
Hmm.
producing that stuff to tweak it, make it better, and not just for a certain amount of people. That is part of your proprietary formula. Is that so? That's one of the things that we're looking heavily into right now. So we work with about 9 different machine translation engines. AWS DeepL is a great one. In fact, I just saw a friend. He posted the other day. He always comes out with some great information in the language translation world, and I was surprised to know Google has not added any languages to their database. They do about 120 different languages right now. Google Translate. Then you have Microsoft. They went from about 80 languages to now they're closer to like 108 languages. The big one, Alibaba. Alibaba had 20 languages. Now they're at 130 languages. They provide the most machine translation of languages than anybody else. So again, Amazon, I know here in the United States, it's king. You got to know Alibaba is like, might even be higher king when it comes to the rest of the world, you know?
Yeah, if you're looking at geography wise, Alibaba controls the world, where
Oh, yeah.
AWS has some control, but not overall presence all over the world. Um, yeah, I think the NLP world is so ripe for AI that it's taken the pretty much the challenge of communication, because rest of the
Yeah.
AI has five senses built into it, right? As in, like, your computer vision is your eyes, your ears are auditory systems like computer has. It's able to touch with robots. Um, there's a study for taste buds and smell senses for this
Mm.
AI system now too, right? So it's taken over the five senses at one way or another. It's just that communication is that the biggest challenge that it has been working on for so long. And once the communication piece and all these five senses comes together, you're going to start seeing a whole lot of different types of services that I mean, come on.
Oh yeah.
I'm getting my mind blown thinking about McDonald's having actual drive-through where just a monitor is giving you the food, right?
Yeah.
No robot, no movement. It's just a monitor that's like, "Here's your food,"
Yeah.
right?
That or I see other well, and I don't know only because I'm not in this field. That the only thing I can provide here is as a kid, I was a translator for my father growing up. You know,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
my
yeah,
dad
yeah.
never spoke English, so but is being able to see where they can take our languages and maybe root them and identify languages now that we like hieroglyphics and things that we currently still don't know what the languages really mean. We can get an idea of what, ancient languages are, but really try to use the current to really decipher the old. And I
Right, right.
think a computer and AI could use that, could work that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, so thinking about the future that forgot about the past, huh? That's so important. Now we can
That's so
figure the
true.
past.
I mean, again, I'm in the language realm. I don't even know really when it comes to hieroglyphics.
Hyro,
Say it.
Hyro, there we go. Hieroglyphics. That's not coming out right, but that's all right. Um, I mean, I think they got that pretty well, like, categorized, and they got a pretty good understanding of the language. But I
Mhm.
don't think it's like 100%. But could you imagine how much faster that would have been to break that down? You
Mhm.
Ooh,
know, back in the day, it took them forever to figure it out until they found Rosetta Stone. Hence the name, of how
Oh
they learn
yeah,
right,
yeah.
languages.
right,
Rosetta Stone was the key piece that they go, this hieroglyphic means this word in Latin.
right,
Oh,
right,
okay. At least we
right,
got somewhat a base. It wasn't a whole dictionary, but they had something, and that really broke the key for them. But at the same time, if you're able to just picture that all and have AI just input that,
Yeah.
big time.
Yeah, I'm thinking so much into the future. Like, if we start in the past, you got all sorts of information. Like, you find a tweet from Elon Musk from 20,000 years ago where he was actually living as an alien in this planet, and he sent his first tweet out, and that's how the Twitter was born.
Oh
Uh,
man. Oh man.
no, I know. I look forward to an AI C3PO. Being able to really just revolutionize everything and say, you know what, I don't speak. I speak everything.
Yeah. So this was kind of cool. So this was maybe 2000 and maybe it was 2016, I think. So I was at CES, so the Consumer Electronics Show, which is
Vegas.
Vegas. As far as I understand, it's the biggest show in the world, and I can attest to that. It was monstrous. I saw about a third of everything that was going on, and I was there for 3 solid days. They had the Las Vegas convention all booked out, MGM booked out, Excalibur booked out, all the main conference, like all the rooms. It was crazy. So I went around. There was one guy there that he had a company. I say guy, but there was one booth or whatever. And what they had is a little keychain that you wore around your neck, and basically they had done speech to text. Basically, in that keychain, it was funny. It was, I don't even know. All it was is a good old flash drive, basically, but it didn't have the flash, or it actually did have the flash plugin because you could plug it in and get updates from Google through their thing. or through their computer or their software that they had.
Mhm.
And so basically, all it was doing is downloading everything that it had from Google. But because I guess the cell phone and they weren't going to try to do it on their phone, they were going to try to just do it through this thing. Someone could talk to you, and it was using that computer on your little necklace that they had, and then it would pipe into your ear. So it was like really the first like speech to text, and then ultimately what it's doing is now it's doing speech to text of a language like English into texting it into English, and then now they're machine translationing it into Spanish, and then the Spanish is doing text to speech. And so that's the process that's going on right now. I'm interested to see what it looks
Wow.
like in the future. And so when people say like, "Oh, I'm using Google and they're going to be able to do that speech to text," this was 2016. Now they got some better stuff going on. But anyways, when you try those, they're still not what you want it to be. They're not
Mhm.
Right.
processing stuff and doing that and spitting it out in different languages. There's always that delay there. But now with internet being around and as fast as it's getting as well with 5G, it can process everything and it can go pretty fast. I just think it's getting better and better, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
C3PO, I don't think he's very far away. I don't think it's going to be as cool and as natural as that. We still got a long ways to get there, but
Well, what about instead of C3PO that Elon Musk has his 120 pounds, very small type of man figure that it's going to be an iRobot? Like he's talking about
Oh
literally
yeah.
producing that robot as a means to have his car being built by these robots, right? So I think he did a funny display on the last time he was releasing that machine learning dojo, and the robot did a dance and all that, but it was actually a human in the costume. But the
uh,
point is, like, he's literally putting in his quarterlies for last quarterly call. He said, we're going to focus on that. That's what we're going to actually build. Because regardless of how we look at AI, how advanced the AI will get, we have to have a means
Mhm.
of output. As in, how does that AI perform, right? Does it have a physical body to perform with, right? So let's say, for example, it's able to translate. Well, if you're walking with your AI body holding his hand and it's able to translate in Mandarin for you, right? People are gonna look at it 15 years from now like, oh, he doesn't have an AI buddy. How sad, right?
yeah,
I think that's literally the world that I'm envisioning right now. Like, you don't need a phone. You literally have a Alexa inside of Elon Musk's robot, and that Alexa does all the talking for you, and communicates and makes your scheduling and all that, and it
Mhm.
walks like a shadow next to you, right? Now I know dystopian visions are coming through, but at the same time, trust me, like if people want it, that's what they're gonna get, right?
Mhm.
yeah,
And Alexa and Siri is not that far off from replacing this phone right here, right? The
yeah,
Siri is going to be able to figure so much out about me than I know about myself because it's
yeah,
been training for the last 5 years. Give it 5 more years, I'm not going to buy phones or pay for phone bills. I'm going to pay for Siri and Alexa because
yeah,
Mhm.
they know me far better than I know myself, and they're able to schedule, they're able to take care of me, make phone calls, and schedule things. I don't even have to think about it, right? And then you put that into a physical body like Elon Musk's little robot, voila.
I
It's
think you're right.
100
I think
taking
it's
care
going
of
to be
stuff.
funny. Cell phones, I think, will still be around for a while, but
Yeah.
it is going to be funny because right now, when you look at your parents, you're like, oh, "Mom, Dad, quit the flip phone thing. It's time to get smart. Get the smartphone. You can do so much better on this.
Yeah.
So you got that, and then ultimately, those smart buddies or whatever they're going to be called, are going
Yeah.
to be out, and I think you're onto something there. That's what it will look like. It's the same thing. My wife and I just had. We watched. I think it was on Netflix or Amazon Prime. I don't know which one it was. Documentary about Elon Musk and when they did the Dragon 4 or whatever about the four
Right.
civilians that went up into space.
That's right.
Mhm.
I realized how fast things are going, and they said something in there, and then I told my wife, and I said, "Don't be surprised. I think in our lifetime,
Yes.
people will be going to space on a
Yes.
vacation
Yeah.
just as much when people are like, hey, I'm going to go to Japan,
That's
on
right.
vacation, or I'm going to Europe or whatever. I think it's a very real thing. And it's not like, oh, that's like 100 years away. That's
No.
like, in my opinion, like 20, 30, 40 years away, you're going to start seeing people going into space on
Mhm.
for vacation to go check it out.
So the tweet came out a couple of days ago for $100,000 per person to go to space now.
Yeah.
$100,000 per person. So you can imagine the scaling it down to a level of $10,000.
Mhm.
I think people will pay for that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
ten thousand
Yep.
dollars is legit. Like, you used to pay for Concorde $10,000 to go to London.
Hmm.
Why would you pay $10,000 to get on a flight to go to space?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, who doesn't, when someone says, like, for example, my wife and I, our 10-year anniversary came and went during COVID, which sucked because
Right.
Oh,
we're all planned up to go to Bora Bora, and we had to put all those plans on hold for right now. We're almost there. The biggest thing, we didn't want to go sit in tiki huts and have a good time, and they're like, "Here, put your mask on,"
I know,
like
right?
that does not sound like a good vacation, honey. Let's just stay put for a little bit longer, and then we'll get it figured out.
Do you have your shots? You have all your shots?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. So ultimately, I think people talk about going to Bora Bora, and you're like, oh man, that's so cool, or Maldives, or wherever. Oh,
Right. Right.
want to go there. People do it. And space is going to be that next place that people are like, oh, did you go to space last weekend?
Right. Right.
Did
Right.
I see pictures you were up in space?
Mhm.
Little transition though. A little transition is that instead of taking an aircraft to fly somewhere, you're actually going to shoot up to the space and wait in the space to get to your target, and you're going to get to your target in less than an hour.
Yeah.
Think
So
about
cool.
that for a second. So there's a little transition there. So you want
Yeah.
to go to Maldives, you want to drop into Maldives rather than fly into
Oh,
Maldives,
that would say, because that's one of the things. So,
right?
one of my good friends from high school, her and her husband, they went to Bora Bora and they went to Maldives. We saw them
Right.
on both of them. So I was like catching up with her. I'm like, all right, hey, we're on a 10-year. We wanted to go do something really cool. So our bucket list is either Maldives or Bora Bora. So which one's better? Her
Mhm.
husband says Bora Bora. She says Maldives. But he's like, hey, just so you know, like it took us literally like 5 hours longer to get over to Bora Bora, or sorry, to the Maldives.
Maldives.
And he goes, it literally like a day and a half. Like it took forever. It felt like, and he goes,
Right.
Maldives, yeah, it's going to take a day, but it just felt so much longer because it was day and a half of
Mhm.
traveling.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, can you imagine that going up and then just come back down?
Well,
Right.
and
Exactly.
we got a lot of money hinging on, on the current on SpaceX and Elon Musk, but there's other people. There's actually somebody else that's more finely tied to government or state or the U.S. at least program that was kind of hidden. I think his name's David Adair. Have you heard of him?
Doesn't
David
No.
sound
Adair.
familiar.
He's discussing not fossil fuel propulsion or liquid propulsion, liquid fuels, and he's been pushing for fusion for years. But the problem, he was one of these child prodigies that was part of the space program since he was like 9. Supposedly, he's been pushing for fusion technologies for propulsion, similar to what we would consider alien spacecraft, and he's been doing it, and he's been part of programs for years. And he said, "The hell with it! I'm going to die. I might as well just put out the next level of propulsion." And he's
Right.
working on that right now, actually releasing whatever he's had his whole life and was been given government agencies. Well, instead of saying, "Okay, let's use the fusion or the nuclear fusion for something good," they said, "No, make a weapon." Well, how can we use this as a weapon? Well, he's really talking about it being part of the next phase of us being in space. So you need to look him up if you don't know about him. David Adair.
David
So
Adair.
my
Adair.
cousin probably, I don't
Yeah.
even know my
Right.
cousins. So,
Right.
yeah, I'll have to check him out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is the part of the podcast where we dive into Star Trek,
Oh
but
yeah.
unfortunately, we're out of time.
Here we go.
Because the Star Trek comes up in every conversation we talk. Because Star Trek is the ultimate. Where do we take our AIs to? Right.
Yeah. Data.
I'm a big Star Trek fan.
The real question, okay, maybe we won't have time to dive in, but I just need to know: are you guys original Trekkies, or are you guys next generation? What are
Oh man.
I
It's
think he's
hard.
original.
It's hard because it's hard to to go from Captain Picard and then go to the new generation, or is it Picard was the new generation,
Picard was
and
new generation, old generation, Captain Kirk? No,
Kirk,
no,
yeah,
Captain
he
Kirk,
was
yeah,
tough, man, to watch sometimes,
yeah. Now
but
he's like Priceline negotiator dude or whatever,
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
But I'd say new generation only because of Data. I just love that guy.
Oh, Data was legit. Data,
Awesome.
and then you got you got the Reading Rainbow guy, Jordy.
Yeah,
Jordy, you
yeah,
know.
Jordy. Yeah, yeah, Jordy.
I grew up. My dad. We were Trekkies, but we
Yeah.
weren't old school Trekkies. Old school Trekkie was like garbage. You
Spock.
know, that was
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah,
man, that's like the trailer parks.
But
You
we
know.
wouldn't have the new Trekkie without the old school Trekkie,
Oh
right?
yeah, I
yeah.
I mean,
completely
it
agree.
was revolutionizing the whole TV industry as they were tracking, right? You're talking about like bringing in so many different aspects of like future, not just technology, but social norms, right? What's
Hmm.
socially acceptable?
Yeah.
So many
Yeah,
different technology and so many different types of behaviors that you're seeing, and you're like, oh, I seen it on TV. Why is it so different in reality? And the reality
yeah.
changed because of TV. I
I
love that
mean,
about Star Trek.
I don't
Mhm.
know. I'm not a TV guru all the way, but tell me another sci-fi series that's bigger than Star Trek. That I mean, it started it all. I feel like, you know. I
Mhm.
That's
don't
right.
know what else was there.
Well, Battlestar Galactica was before that, right? Before Star Trek.
But was it a
Oh,
TV
really?
series?
It was, but it wasn't as yeah, as long running. But
Hmm.
let me think. No, you're right. Star Trek and Star Wars.
Start,
Um,
yeah, but it wasn't like a
the
TV
TV
series. Like
series. No,
yeah, I'm
no.
looking like, hey, I remember, man, we had the, eventually when we got rich enough, when we had the VCR, we recorded it, if we could have
Yes.
been there right at the right time. If not, man, we were there
Yeah.
Tuesday night, 7 o'clock,
Yeah.
it was on, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, with that said, today is Wednesday night, and this has been an amazing podcast recording. I'm telling you, because Lucky, you can tell, right?
Yes.
It's getting better and better every time we
Fantastic.
talk. Every guest just brings another level of excitement. So, with that,
And
Kyle, I
knowledge.
cannot thank you enough, man. Thanks for making the time. Appreciate the talk.
Absolutely.
Um,
Fun getting to know you guys more. I know Asif we'll see each other around for sure. And would love to come on again someday in the future. We can talk more Star Trek or whatever else is going on.
we will break down NLP to
Mhm.
the level of ears burning, because NLP is just so amazing, so cool. There's so many angles to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll need a more than an hour to break that down,
Yep.
because yeah, there's just NLP is amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Well, hey, take care. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Be
Lucky.
safe.
All right, sir.